BBC News next on BBC World.
Stride boldly into the future on BBC World with Science World, unlocking the secrets of the ice.
She was meant to be left in peace. I have to come to terms with that.
BBC World takes a look at the extraordinary side of life.
This is the future of war.
Investigating...
She knows more.
Indulgence in the inconvenience that will be caused. I seek their help and their vigilance. We have said...
She's a very loving child.
Through their help, I am sure that we can get to those that are responsible for this evil deed today, we will, of course, be vigilant. We will have the necessary security in place, but London will continue to...
Treatment is a success.
See the whole picture with Correspondent in 30 minutes on BBC World.
Now on BBC World, the latest international news with Adrian Finnegan.
The BBC's television centre in London is evacuated as police begin a major anti-terrorism operation. Bomb disposal experts carry out a controlled explosion outside the BBC building in the west of the capital. The first signs that foot and mouth disease may have reached mainland Europe. And South African teams join efforts to aid the victims of Mozambique's floods. Hello, this is BBC News. I'm Adrian Finnegan. Bomb disposal officers have carried out a controlled explosion on a suspicious vehicle thought to be a taxi outside the BBC's television centre in West London. At around 12:30 a.m. there was an explosion at the front of the building. The front of television centre had been evacuated and broadcasting continued throughout. Jane Bennett-Powell reports.
The police told the BBC there had been a warning with a recognised code word about a suspect vehicle, a black taxi parked directly outside the new front entrance of TV Centre in Wood Lane. The road outside had been sealed off, preventing through traffic. The newsroom, which produces news coverage for domestic television and radio, was evacuated at 11:30. Explosives officers sent a robot to investigate. However, at 12:27 there was a large explosion. Controlled, according to the police, which smashed glass in the reception area and knocked out power and damaged the newsroom. Arrangements were made to keep BBC TV and radio on the air. There were no injuries, but debris littered the road outside and the smell of plastic permeated the air. The explosion comes just a week and a half after a Semtex bomb contained in a torch blew up in the hands of a cadet outside a territorial army base nearby in West London. It's not known who was behind that explosion, but dissident Republicans have been blamed. Jane Bennett-Powell, BBC News.
Well, joining me now here in the studio is our news editor, Laurie Margolis. Laurie, you were with the cameraman who shot the material that we saw there in Jane Bennett-Powell's report. What was the sequence of events leading up to what we saw?
The sequence was a warning, a code word warning. Now, the police are saying they didn't receive a warning with a code word directly to them, but nevertheless, what was passed on to the authorities here at the BBC, the security authorities, if you like, was a code-worded warning. This was just before midnight. The area that butts onto Wood Lane, in other words, what we call Stage 6, the newsroom area, was evacuated, so everybody was well out of the way. They were back in the innards of this very large complex. I went with the cameraman onto the roof of one of our buildings, about maybe 200 yards away. At about 12:15, 12:20, there was the Army bomb disposal Land Rover turned up. They sent their robot vehicle in towards this taxi where the suspect package was. At about 12:15 or 12:20, they fired a round in, which presumably was to open a door or to open a window to sort of gain access to the thing. And then at about 12:27 was the massive explosion, which we've been showing you. Now, whether it was a controlled explosion, I don't know. I hear what the police say. I think it was a controlled detonation. In other words, they intended at that point to blow up whatever was there. Whether they quite realised what they were blowing up, the size of the explosion will emerge in the fullness of time. I've seen bomb explosions in Northern Ireland. I would say, by comparison, this wasn't a particularly big one. I wouldn't have thought there was an enormous amount of explosive in there, and I don't think the actual level of damage is that great. Nevertheless, dark London street, it's quiet, 200 yards away, it looks pretty impressive.
Now, the BBC prides itself on its editorial independence. It is a British organisation, though. Has the BBC been targeted before? Who'd want to target the BBC?
That's a very good question. I mean, obviously, with explosions, one thinks first towards Irish terrorism. To the very best of my knowledge, there has never been a direct attack like this on a media operation, on either in... there have obviously been bomb attacks around BBC premises in Northern Ireland, but an attack like this, which appears to be a direct attack on a media operation, to my knowledge, is extremely rare, if it's ever happened at all.
You said that there was a coded bomb warning given. Now, that doesn't imply that it was some sort of random act. It must be a known organisation, then, to the security forces.
Well, there are code words and code words. Whether it was a known code word, I don't know. There are various code words which are used. We never really learn what they are. I mean, again, one thinks, with terrorism, you think of Irish things, you think possibly of animal-related things. I don't think this is an animal-related thing. We had this strange incident about 2 weeks ago, just round the corner in South Africa Road, where this unfortunate army cadet picked up a torch which was filled with an explosive which subsequently turned out to be Semtex and has caused him very serious injuries. This incident this evening was only 200 or 300 yards from where that happened, so one assumes there is some sort of linkage, but quite what it's about we really don't know.
And you said the BBC is in itself a very big complex here in West London. What happened to broadcasting and the staff who were working in the building throughout this?
It kept going to an extent. It is a large area. The area that was evacuated was the newsroom. Now, the only output that comes directly from that area is actually News 24 most of the time. We carried on with some broadcasting from Millbank in Westminster. We carried on from some in other studios in safer parts of the building. So broadcasting continued by and large.
I'm just being told that we've heard that the police have in fact confirmed that it was a bomb that was actually contained in the car.
It comes as no great surprise, I have to say.
Laurie Margolis, thanks for joining us. Now, other news. Despite stringent protection measures, there are fears that foot and mouth disease may have...
I mean, clearly, as well, the very fact that this device was planted outside the BBC, which is not known in any sense as being a legitimate military target for obvious reasons, does suggest that they're trying to seek as much publicity as they can at the moment. And Deputy Assistant Commissioner Fry suggested that publicity was their primary consideration at the moment.
This appears a fairly familiar tactic, maybe on behalf of dissident Republicans, in that they pick targets that aren't necessarily at the moment going to cause great loss of life, but will draw maximum attention to their campaign. We talked about Hammersmith Bridge. This one seems fairly typical, a fairly typical target, maybe.
Yes, though, I mean, clearly, obviously, the people of Omagh would disagree with that because, you know, we all saw the devastation that the Omagh bomb caused last year.
Of course.
Certainly, this didn't lead to any... there was only one minor injury because of this, and Deputy Assistant Commissioner Fry praised the BBC and the work of London Underground staff for ensuring that everything was done to keep everybody as safe as possible.
Tell me about the witnesses. We've heard from the police. What have witnesses heard who, of course, there at the time of the explosion?
Well, they've all given testimony to the sheer scale and power of the blast. They've talked about houses shaking, windows were blown out. One man said his caravan shook up to a mile away. So, I mean, clearly it was. Deputy Assistant Commissioner Fry said it was a very high explosive charge, and witnesses have backed that up.
It's a frightening development, isn't it, to see flames back on the streets of London following a car bomb?
What happened? What's your memory of it? Just a big bang, everything started shaking. We thought the lorry had something had come off the A40. It turned out it was a bomb.
So when you say everything started shaking, what were the sort of...
Well, the caravan just shook, everything fell off the shelves, and, you know, the springs on the bridge started bouncing. So we thought something had an accident. We went out thinking of it, and it wasn't an accident, it was a bomb at the BBC.
OK, that's fantastic. Thanks a lot. C. OK, Matthew, you ready? What's your name, sorry?
Kathy Dolan.
Kathy is with a C, is it?
K.
K, and Dolan's D-O-L-A-N.
That's right.
Can you just describe, Kathy, what your memories of it were, your recollections?
Well, the first one was a controlled one, but I was a bit concerned because it wasn't massive. And then about 10 minutes later, there was an absolute massive explosion. I thought the windows had come in on me. When I went upstairs, my bedroom window had been actually opened, which I had closed. And the little catch on the window was broken.
And what could you see?
Well, I couldn't see nothing of a big tree at the back of me. But I rang my friends, and a few friends round me, a disabled person at the back. And I rang her to find out. I heard the alarm, and I looked after the community centre, so I had to go round there to make sure that all the windows were...
Was almost.
It's further up along the green. I've been told that there's a few windows broken, as somebody just gone in to pull them up.
So what did people say they saw? What were the descriptions like of the car?
Well, nobody seems to know anything about it. Police said that there were controlled explosion, but the second one, if it was a controlled one, it must have been awfully big. But the first one, I believe it was, but the second one was just massive. I've never heard anything like coming out. I'm still trembling from it, frightened like
OK, Kathy, thanks ever so much.
A couple of witnesses there speaking of events in West London over the past couple of hours. Police have confirmed that they've carried out a controlled explosion on what they now say and confirm was a high explosive bomb outside the building, the BBC Television Centre in West London. It follows reports of a suspicious vehicle parked outside the building in Wood Lane. Well, back to our reporter Lawrence Lee, who's at the scene. Lawrence, the area is still sealed off. Come to that in a moment. What did the head of the anti-terrorist squad have to say a couple of moments ago?
Well, he said for a start that in fact it wasn't a controlled explosion, that the bomb had gone off while officers were trying to trying to carry out a controlled explosion. He pointed the finger directly at the real IRA, who he said, because he said a coded warning was issued, the same code word that was used last year when a device was planted in Acton on the railway line.
What advice did the head of the anti-terrorist squad then give to Londoners who are going to wake up and hear this news and feel pretty nervous, I should imagine?
Well, yes, that's right, but as I've already said, he also said that they were trying to do everything they could to make London as safe as possible, and obviously he asked for the public's help in doing so. He also, in terms of this incident, praised the work of the BBC staff and London Underground staff. White City Tube is directly over the road, for ensuring that everybody was kept as safe as possible.
One person employed by London Underground is the only casualty of this explosion. And I understand that he has slight injuries. Bomb disposal officers from the Metropolitan Police attended the scene within 20 minutes of the original call and started to attempt to do a controlled explosion. But while they were carrying out those procedures, the bomb exploded. It has caused minimal damage to the BBC premises, but has wrecked the taxi, and there is debris over a fairly wide area. Given the coded message, I'm associating this incident with incidents we had last year, most notably the incident on the railway at Acton, and believe that those responsible for this explosion are indeed a dissident Irish Republican group, and that is...
The Deputy Assistant Commissioner Alan Fry, the head of the Metropolitan Police Anti-Terror Squad, talking about the explosion outside the BBC Television Centre in West London, which we're covering for you live here on Sky News. Our reporter Lawrence Lee is at the scene. Lawrence, Alan Fry just talked about the real IRA there. Extremely significant development, not only in terms of the peace process, but in terms of the safety of Londoners and their future strategy.
Yes, I mean, the main significance of it, I think, in one sense, is the size of the bomb. I mean, certainly the bag that was placed on the railway line at Acton was not seen to have a very big device inside it. And the other target, Hammersmith Bridge, was also seen as a soft target, but was also quite a small device. This does appear to have been a much bigger bomb. He described it as being high explosive, and it does appear on one level to be an escalation on the part of the real IRA, and the fact that it was planted outside the BBC, an extremely high profile organisation, which is also a very soft target as well, not by their terms a legitimate target. It has no military significance at all, and has been done for publicity purposes only, but it does look as if they're saying, remember we're here, and remember what we're capable of doing.
Before confirmation of this from Alan Fry a couple of minutes ago, that indeed that this was the main group that was suspected, were there any clues to this? Because there was an explosion a while or so ago in White City, albeit on a smaller scale.
Yes, but as I've already said, they're not linking it to that explosion because of the specific code word that was used with this incident was the same code word that was used in the warnings at Acton and at Hammersmith last year, and that's why it's being linked to the real IRA and those incidents rather than the incident at the Territorial Army base a week or two ago.
So the bomb has exploded. More and more emergency services arriving on scene. Events moving very fast. What's actually happening there right now?
Well, at the moment, as you can see behind me, the area is still sealed off. It is being kept sterile while the police go about their usual business of checking for forensic evidence and so on. Efforts are being made to try to get people back into their homes. It's been very difficult for people living near here because they haven't been allowed through the cordon. But at the moment, that is being eased back gently. It has to be said as well, the police naturally in these sorts of situations do have to check for other devices. Just because one has blown up doesn't mean there aren't any more. So they're going through that whole situation as well. It may be several hours before the whole area is allowed back to return to normal.
Now we understand that employees at the BBC Television Centre, many of course work overnight at that building. Hundreds indeed were evacuated. None of them were injured. An employee of London Underground was hurt, as you say. But have they been let back into the building, and indeed local residents?
No, as I just said, a lot of local residents haven't been let back in. They're still standing around here waiting to be let through the cordon. In terms of the BBC itself, what the BBC say is that they were asked by the police to evacuate the reception area of Television Centre close to the front, near where this car was parked. Staff who work on BBC television programmes that were going out at that time were moved. For instance, the news programmes were actually moved from their normal area back, further back in the building to a more secure area, and they then carried on doing that. So it wasn't the case that I don't think the whole of the BBC was evacuated, only a certain number were.
Lawrence, we have just received confirmation before our very eyes. We have confirmation that it was indeed high explosive. It was a bomb. That's what Alan Fry said a couple of minutes ago. And we have just seen it in the most spectacular and disturbing fashion flames leaping into the air. What else did Alan Fry have to say about this, about the nature of the explosive device?
He didn't give very many details. He simply said that it was a very large, high explosive device that went off while his staff were trying to carry out a controlled explosion on it. Really, he gave much more detail about who may have been behind it. As we've said, he pointed directly the finger at the real IRA. I believe the pictures you're referring to were ones, in fact, that were shot by the BBC from a place just over the road while some of their people were evacuated. And as you say, I haven't seen those pictures, but I'm told they are incredibly graphic and give a very good illustration of the scale and the power of the explosion inside this taxi.
Lawrence, people are tuning in all the time, and we're updating them on events in West London. Tell us what happened a couple of hours ago. Take us through briefly the sequence of events, starting with, presumably, this coded telephone warning.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The police were told that there were two coded telephone warnings, one to an unnamed Central London hospital and one to a charitable trust that's again unnamed. The code word that was used was recognised as one that's been used in the past by the real IRA, most notably last year in relation to incidents when a bag with explosive was placed on the railway line at Acton and the explosion at Hammersmith Bridge last year as well. The police then told the BBC television centre to evacuate staff from the front of the building. That was at about 11:30. At 12:30, while they were attempting to carry out a controlled explosion on a maroon taxi that had been parked in a taxi rank directly outside the front of Television Centre, the bomb went off, as you've said, in spectacular fashion, and the police are pointing the finger directly at the real IRA as being responsible for this. It's being seen as an escalation of the violence, particularly because of the size of the explosion, and they are asking people to be very much on their guard now. And are asking for the public to help just in case any more incidents of this nature come to light in the coming days and weeks.
Well, from the pictures that we have just seen from the BBC, it looks like possibly many more lives could have been lost if more people have been closer by, and indeed if there hadn't been a controlled a warning.
Yes, that's true. I mean, as you can see in here, it was obviously an extremely powerful explosion. And as I've said, the police have praised the staff at the BBC and London Underground for White City Tube, directly over the road, for acting so promptly and making sure that everybody was kept out of the way. I assume, though I haven't spoken to any BBC staff, that this must have come as an enormous surprise to them. I mean, the BBC, particularly in Northern Ireland, is known to be one of the places to receive coded warnings of bombs placed elsewhere, and certainly they're not seen in any sort of sense as a legitimate target here by the terrorist organisations, and they must have been enormously surprised that this vehicle with the bomb on it was planted directly outside their building. Naturally enough, it is a soft target, and it's extremely evident that this must have been a way for the real IRA to try to get maximum publicity, presumably from their point of view with minimum bloodshed, and as we know, only one person was slightly injured, so to that extent at least I suppose you'd say they succeeded.
Well, a couple of moments ago we heard from Deputy Assistant Commissioner Alan Fry. He tried to give us a flavour of how powerful this bomb was, and really no words can describe it. Pictures from the BBC of an explosion from a bomb outside a taxi in front of the BBC television centre. Alan Fry just gave a press conference a short time ago, and he gave us further details.
One person employed by London Underground is the only casualty of this explosion, and I understand that he has slight injuries. Bomb disposal officers from the Metropolitan Police attended the scene within 20 minutes of the original call and started to attempt to do a controlled explosion, but while they were carrying out those procedures, the bomb exploded. It has caused minimal damage to the BBC premises, but has wrecked the taxi, and there is debris over a fairly wide area. Given the coded message, I am associating this incident with incidents we had last year, most notably the incident on the railway at Acton, and believe that those responsible for this explosion are indeed a dissident Irish Republican group, and
tragic and difficult events unfolding in West London. That was the Deputy Assistant Commissioner Alan Fry, the head of the Metropolitan Police Anti-Terrorist Squad. Now, he described it, but we can actually see it. Pictures of this frightening, very frightening explosion, courtesy of the BBC. This is what happened. Police were in the middle of trying to carry out a controlled explosion outside the BBC's news centre in West London when that huge blast went off. Now, a number of witnesses have reported that up to half a mile away, furniture in their house shook. Minimal damage was caused to the BBC news centre itself, but of course the area is going to be cordoned off for quite a while. And our thanks to Lawrence Lee for keeping us updated. Any further developments in West London, of course, we'll bring them to you here on Sky News. There's no sign of a let-up in the spread of foot and mouth disease.
BBC's television centre in London as bomb disposal experts attempted to examine a taxi parked outside. The explosion occurred at around 12:30 a.m. in front of the building. The head of the anti-terrorist squad in London, Alan Fry, has confirmed that it was a bomb of very high explosive. One person was slightly injured. A warning was received before the bomb went off. Police believe dissident Republicans are behind the attack. And that's all from the BBC World Newsroom for the moment. Goodbye.
Hello there. We're going to begin our weather roundup now here in Beijing, where Saturday saw another sandstorm across the city. That's the fourth one this year, and that's quite unusual. The sand should be moving out of the way, though. We should see a bit more sunshine over the next few days. Temperatures rising to some heavy showers for Africa, in particular through Malawi, northern parts of Mozambique and northern parts of Zimbabwe. Again, some lighter showers as you head further towards the south. Seen some heavy rains recently in the Seychelles, more heavy showers through parts of the Indian Ocean. Moving in towards Australia, some heavy showers likely along these coastal areas, but high pressure is going to bring a lot of fine weather to the islands of New Zealand. And then across those southern oceans in across South America, here we're likely to find some more showers moving into northern parts of Argentina, and there's a reminder of that snowy weather for northeastern parts of the US.
The blood gushes in our veins.
An unfinished war.
It's adventurous.
See the whole picture with Correspondent, next on BBC World.
I've been reporting on world affairs for the BBC for 30 years. I've often found myself in the right place at the wrong time. If I've learned anything, it's that such events are never black and white. Simpsons World tries to reflect that. I speak to ordinary people as well as world leaders and listen to what they've got to say. It's a straightforward approach to a complex world.
Simpsons World, at these times on BBC World.
Making sense of it all.
To survive in a competitive world, looks might be important. Strength may give you an edge. And of course, speed is of the essence. But never underestimate the value of intelligence. Asia Today at these times on BBC World.
Now on BBC World, the second of a two-part report from Bridget Kendall on Vladimir Putin's first year in office in Correspondent.
Hinduja brothers seduced the British establishment. Panorama exposing the truth. Tonight, 10:15, BBC One.
A bomb has gone off outside the main broadcasting centre for BBC television and radio in London. The device exploded soon after midnight, and police say they believe it was the work of the dissident Irish Republican group, the Real IRA.
Hygiene officials in the UK are continuing to rush through special licences to allow the first movement of livestock since the outbreak of foot and mouth disease.
And in Mozambique, thousands of people are refusing to be rescued from the rising floodwaters.
Hello, this is BBC News. I'm Darren Jordan.
And I'm Liz Pike. Hello. A bomb has exploded outside BBC Television Centre in London. The blast happened just after midnight as a bomb disposal team was attempting to carry out a controlled explosion on a suspicious taxi which was parked outside the building. One person was slightly injured in the attack, which anti-terrorist branch officers say they believe is the work of the dissident Republican group, the Real IRA.
The area was cleared after two coded warnings to a charity and a hospital. Then this. High explosives packed into a taxi outside the BBC. The police said it was a big device. It went off as bomb disposal experts were attempting to carry out a controlled explosion. The blast could be heard 7 miles away, and debris was showered over a large area. The anti-terrorist branch was certain they knew who was behind the car bomb.
Given the coded message, I'm associating this incident with incidents we had last year, most notably the incident on the railway at Acton, and believe that those responsible for this explosion are indeed a dissident Irish Republican group, and that is where we are commencing this investigation.
There was only one casualty, a London Underground worker. Staff at the BBC were given enough warning to evacuate the front of the centre before the bomb went off. Windows were blown out and the building shook with the force of the blast.
The fireball seemed to fill all of your vision for a time. There was obviously a huge bang, and you could feel it. Not debris, but you could certainly feel the force of the explosion about 200 yards away. It is very startling, however many times you think you've seen it.
I haven't been that close to the explosion before. I've seen the aftermath, but this is the first detonation I've seen, and it was quite an experience, a huge orange fireball and a pall of smoke that even in the night sky was quite visible.
BBC programmes were disrupted for a time as staff set up operations in other parts of the building, and large areas have been cordoned off. Last year, the Real IRA launched a rocket grenade attack on the MI6 headquarters in London, and the police have been on high alert since then. The BBC has never been targeted like this before, and is regarded as a new tactic for Irish terrorists. Stephen Cape, BBC News.
And Stephen Cape joins us now from the scene. He's our crime correspondent. Stephen, extraordinary scenes there as the bomb went off. What's happening now?
Well, basically, forensic teams are here now. They're going through the area very carefully. We do know that in a few minutes, a camera crew will be allowed into the area to actually look at the damage, look at the wreck, obviously, of the taxi, and probably film the outside of the BBC building, which is really an indication that a lot of the work has been